Every capitalist is always trying to either make more money or survive competitively by saving on his labor costs. But here comes the contradiction. If all capitalists are reducing the number of workers they pay or reducing the pay they give to their workers, what will result is that the working people have less and less money. And if they have less and less money, they can't buy what the capitalists are producing to sell. The solution was credit. We loaded the world up. House credit, that's your mortgage. Car payment credit, nobody buys a car except by paying out. Credit cards, which didn't exist before the 1970s for anything but traveling businessmen, and only a small number of them. And then when that was not enough, we loaded up, for the first time in American history, an entire generation of students who can't get a degree without loading up with tens of thousands of dollars of debt. We kept the system going. People could buy stuff even though their wages didn't pay for it by borrowing. And in 2008, the predictable happened.
So, as Richard Wolff is pointing out here, it really does seem like capitalism is reaching its end. But what really does this mean, and how did we get here? Now, you see, the harsh reality about capitalism is that it really doesn't work because every single person in the chain is looking to exploit you, and every single one of the industries that are busy trying to exploit you want to exploit you to the maximum extent. So, let's look at this for example. If you are a worker, your employer wants to squeeze out every single dollar that you are worth. Now, of course, they have to pay you some wages, otherwise you wouldn't work there, so they have to concede a little bit to you. But then there's the next layer, where there's your landlord. Your landlord wants to squeeze out every single dollar that you are worth. Every single penny that you own, your landlord would gladly take from you in order to put into their bank account. Unfortunately for them, they can't do that because you always have the choice of moving. That is, of course, until maybe one or two investment companies buy up all the property in the country, but that hasn't happened yet. So the degree to which they can exploit you is somewhat limited, but they have a lot more power than you realize because usually if you're living in any particular town, there's usually only a handful of landlords in that town. And so they have pretty limited competition, and they're pretty good at making sure that the rents are as high as they feasibly can be. But then you go to the next industry, like the health insurance industry, for example. Now, the health insurance industry really gets you because they know that they can charge you for every single penny that you're worth even more, and they can put you in debt and make money off of the financing of that debt. They know this because if you don't have access to healthcare, then how are you supposed to be alive? But here's where the problem is. If you're a worker and you are getting exploited by all of these different industries all at once, and they're trying to squeeze out every single penny that you're worth, the reality is the cost of everything becomes so high that you can't really afford anything. And if working class people do not have the ability to afford anything around them, especially if they are not able to afford all of the excess consumer products that capitalism depends on selling, well, then the entire system falls apart. And as Richard Wolff stated, obviously we get into a situation where we have ballooning credit that's supposed to make up for that, but that credit can only go so far, and that credit serves to accelerate inflation. So if we have all of these things stacked on top of each other, we are really at a breaking point. Now, there are tons and tons of solutions that have been done in the past, but every single one of the solutions that have worked in the past would be something that people in Washington, by and large, have categorically disregarded and refused to accept as a violation of their sort of neoliberal orthodoxy. Why is that? Well, because one obvious answer is to adopt a more socialist economy. It would be to replace these businesses with worker cooperatives. It would be to nationalize major industries that are necessary for the production of like critical goods or play a significant role in, infrastructure and stuff like that. That would mean radically changing who has ownership over the economy. It would require things like land reforms, like giving tenants ownership of the apartment buildings that they live in, giving farmers ownership of the land that they work. And they don't want to do that because obviously that challenges their donors. But then even more mild reforms, things like a debt jubilee, for example, run up against that orthodoxy because, of course, despite the fact that under traditional capitalist economic theory, the interest rates on loans are there to pay for the risk of default, we live in a system that really doesn't like to let people default on their loans. It turns out that big banks and even small payday lenders really don't like the idea of people being able to get out of debt through bankruptcy. And with that as a reality, our bankruptcy laws make it incredibly difficult for people to actually go bankrupt and default on their debts. So they won't even give working class people an inch, despite the fact that there's a long historical precedent that shows that a debt jubilee would make a huge difference and sort of reset the economy. They literally cannot even allow any reforms to be put in place that would allow capitalism to operate further, because if they did that, it would allow working class people to realize that there are options outside of capitalism. When faced with the choice of doing something that would extend the shelf life of capitalism or doing something that makes it seem like capitalism is the only option, they will always choose the latter.
Most people don't really know what capitalism is. Most people don't even know what socialism is. But most people are not capitalists because they don't have capitalist money. They're not billionaires.
What AOC says here is exactly right. And of course Fox is upset about that because they have a role in selling the capitalist myth.
Charlie.
Oof. That was terrifying. I'm going to have nightmares. It's sort of hard to determine whether they're this dumb or they're evil.
If you're watching this, chances are you are not a capitalist. Most people in America are not capitalists. They may think they are, but they're really just exploited workers with Stockholm Syndrome. Simply benefiting from a capitalist system, no matter how big or small, does not make you, by definition, a capitalist. A salaried worker is not a capitalist. Capitalists are people who invest in companies or industries and then live off the returns. Corporate raiders and looters who pour massive investments into companies only to gut them and then sell off and cash out to the detriment of workers by killing those jobs, those people are capitalists. A salaried or hourly wage employee who has their surplus value extracted from their labor by the capitalist class, no matter how firm in their belief that they may think the capitalist system is the best one, they are not capitalists, they are workers. A guy who runs a political action group and relies on donations from millionaires and billionaires to sell this myth is not a capitalist.
I live like a capitalist every single day, Cenk. I live as a capitalist, okay? I live when I believe.
No matter what they might say. But what fuels this type of thinking? In part, it could be described by this quote from John Steinbeck. I guess the trouble was that we didn't have any self-admitted proletarians. Everyone was a temporarily embarrassed capitalist. Many people in the working class in America do not want to acknowledge that their socioeconomic status, if insufficient, is beyond their control or could potentially decline over time. And in part, that's because of the myth of the American dream. You know, if you work hard enough, you'll advance in society. But that's becoming more and more unattainable. Studies over the past few decades have examined socioeconomic mobility. And what they found was, with a rise in income inequality, the harder it becomes for people to experience upward social mobility. Meaning, the more wealth that's concentrated at the top by the capitalist class, the harder it becomes for you or other workers in this country to prosper and advance up the socioeconomic ladder. And Fox, beyond being a megaphone for the Republican Party, has a role in selling this myth to the American people to the benefit of the capitalist class. That capitalist class continues to get rich off of investments in companies that keep your wages low to increase profits. Fox then convinces its viewers that raising wages would be bad for the economy. It's a vicious cycle, and you are the victim.